I saw an advertisement in June 2018 asking for a female Sheffield artist who works with ceramic or mosaic to apply for a commission for a large 20 metre square wall inside a new privately owned student accommodation building. The brief outlined the theme based around Anne Knight, who was a Quaker, abolitionist and early feminist who was born in 1786. And although from Chelmsford started the first ever women's political organisation in Sheffield. Pacifist, Quaker, equality campaigner, Anne Knight was neither glamorous nor militant. I felt that these images were either over-glamorised or too harsh for the project and the space and didn't fit with my style of work. It was important to show how Anne peacefully campaigned through petitions and post-it notes with little poems written on, as well as making the first ever placard and being instrumental in the setting up of women's political groups. A mover and shaker, but not a bomber. From the suffragette marches, the banners created from the suffragette marches created an energetic shape for the space. I feel like this is going faster, way faster. I experimented with using flags and banners, even slogans, but felt I had to do Anne Knight justice by giving the piece more energy than this. We needed a strong, not a wishy-washy design. I'm cutting some out now. I experimented with geometric geology, but finally came up with an outline I really liked and the beginning of a more geological design which could represent the passing of time and the gathering of different types of people working towards one cause, initiated by a few women, including Anne Knight, and over time becoming a huge group of women and men who fought for women's right to vote and equality in general. Design developed as a gathering of sedimentary layers that followed the shape of a flowing banner or flag, but also a burst of energy as you enter the space, moving up to the mezzanine level. The real meaning to the students who will actually be living there, the message that one person can make a difference and together we're strong. Whoa, bam, yeah. I decided to add a timeline to the piece using etched brass plaques. However, history is not my strong point, so I contacted Professor Julie Gottlieb from the University of Sheffield to help me sort out the dates. I decided to use an expanded palette initiated by the purple, cream and green of the suffragette movement, used recently in a women's march to celebrate 100 years since the first women getting the vote. I decided to strengthen the colours to represent better the intense feeling and struggle behind the women's movement in the UK. We decided that the rest of the wall needed to be tiled too, and after lots of discussion between the team, we decided to go with one of the RAL colours used for the rest of the building. So we've gone for the yellow, and Photoshop was used here. That's the digital bit, I'm afraid, not much of it, to make this colourful image, and CAD was used to lay out where the tiles would go and to try that out. So the piece took about 6 weeks of extremely long days to make. The actual mosaic is about 13 square metres of the 20. And I took about 6 weeks of really long days, and I think my kids thought I'd actually moved out at that point. So, husband too. And very, very kindly, Yorkshire Art Space friend Kate Orme let me use her studio because mine's full of mosaic materials. But anyway, the timeline started to take shape. And I decided to make these 3D oak shapes instead of circular, which I'd initially planned to do. And I made some brass plaques, which were I hand drew in my sketchbook, and then they were sent away to be etched into brass and backfilled with black paint so that they would really stand out. And they cover the whole timeline. So they go from, a portrait of Anne Knight, Anne Knight's first banner, all the way through to March for Women, Green and Common Women, and #MeToo. I tried to use the text from the era so that it really shows, what was happening in this sort of style of the time. Whew, I think I've caught up with myself now. I've cut loads out. Anyway. So there you can see the plaques as they're starting to be, installed onto the oak pieces. So it was quite handy because I made the pattern up as I went along just to entertain myself. Each row I was thinking, what shape shall I put in this one? And they were quite geometric, so it meant that I could, when I decided to make them these shapes instead of round, it meant they would fit in better. So the mosaic mesh was finally cut into sections. Each row was marked with letters and numbers, and there were also marked tapes that joined all the pieces to match each section to the next and previous. I even raided a local international supermarket for their unwanted bread trays, with permission, of course, and used these to stack the rows of mosaic in order. We had a 4 metre square space to work in, so we had to keep things very compact. The mosaic was installed under my supervision by Wayne and Rod, and after 2 attempts to install the piece, because the building wasn't ready, we finally arrived on the day when 90 mattresses were being delivered through the space, and 2 guys were working on the electric doors on step ladders at each end of the 4 metre square space. So initially the builders were walking through sort of like looked sceptically at us putting this template up and what on earth is this, and just sort of walked past us. And then on the last day when we were finishing off, they just stopped and stared at it for a bit and then looked at us and went, what's this? You know, never seen anything like it. And they loved it, which was very nice for me because I like it to reach everybody. So this is actually the bit that I'm just going to read this last bit, which I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read this last bit. Even though this is where the extra slide was. Yeah. So it's a bit that Professor Julie Gottlieb wrote, which is going to be a piece of text on the window that you can see from outside as well as in. And so to explain about the piece. So she's given the piece a title, Anne Knight and the Dawning of the Women's Movement in the UK. This mosaic mural represents Anne Knight, 1786 to 1862, her legacy as a pioneer feminist and the cyclical progress of the women's movement in Britain, from the era in which she was born to our present day. Knight was a Quaker and an anti-slavery activist, and she formed the first women's suffrage society in Sheffield in 1851. Like this mural, the women's movement has developed in waves, but consistent throughout has been the aim to achieve equality for women in political rights and representation, education, work, health, sexuality, and in the family. It is something special that Sheffield is the birthplace of a campaign that finally attained its objectives when Parliament passed the Representation of the People Act in 1918, and a decade later, the Equal Franchise Act in 1928. These achievements are not the credit of great leaders alone, but to the power of collective action, solidarity and sisterhood. An artwork conceived as we mark the centenaries of women's partial suffrage and women's entry into Parliament, artist Coralie Turpin gives visual form and texture to the uneven and fluctuating, yet overall progressive movement towards gender equality in Britain. That's Julie V. Gottlieb, Professor of Modern History, University of Sheffield. And that is it.